Hey, because I never publicly shared my journey into higher education, my EDU breakthrough, I'm going to share it in this video. But it doesn't really start with me, it starts with my mother. So I'll share with you guys. My mother had 3 kids by the age of 19 years old. She dropped out of high school, she ended up getting her GED. Now, by the time she got her GED, I'm probably about 5 years old, and we were struggling. There were days where we didn't have any lights on in the house. And you know when your lights are off because you can walk in the house, it's a different silence. It is a different silence. There's no hum, there's no buzz. You know when your lights are off. All right. But we had times where we didn't have no lights on in the house. We didn't have any water, right? Where we had to go to the neighbor's house, take the water hose, fill up the water, the 5-gallon water bucket, because it's the only way a toilet will flush if your water's off is if you pour water down there. Okay, some days or weeks we didn't have any power, right? So how do you cook? We had a kerosene heater in the middle of the living room floor there, because on top of that kerosene heater, it's flat and it's hot. You can put a pot on there. You can put some noodles, some chopped up hot dogs, and stuff like that. But that's how we survived. But I remember when my mother decided to further her education. So she enrolled at this school back home in Hampton, Virginia. It was called Commonwealth College. My mother took it probably took her 7 to 10 months, but it was a short-term program on accounting. And my mother finished that accounting course with a 3.5 GPA. Then she started working for the city of Hampton. Why am I sharing all of this? I'm sharing all of this because I remember what our life was like before my mother went to a for-profit school, before she received short, meaningful training, before I know what that life was like. No water sometimes, no light sometimes no food. Having to go to the neighbor and knock, right? My mama said, "Can I borrow an egg?" My mama said, "Can we borrow a cup of sugar?" Right? Having to use food stamps. I remember one of my first gifts from Christmas, I'm probably 8, 9 years old. My main gift that year was a gift from the Salvation Army. It was a large excavator, right? A large yellow excavator. Pretty cool stuff now that I'm doing what I'm doing today. But nonetheless, I remember those days. But I also remember after she went through that, after she went to that for-profit school, she finished her program in accounting. She started working for the city of Hampton, and I remember our lives getting significantly better. And she always poured into my brother George, my sister Tasha, and I the importance of education. So that always stuck with me. But her transformation before her before going to a school, excuse me, until after going to a school, I said, "Wow, I want to have that type of impact on somebody," right? And so here I am going to high school, never making honor roll, never, probably the worst student. In fact, I failed the 11th grade in high school. I finished high school with a 1.8 GPA. Um, I ended up going into the Air Force, one of the best decisions I made in my life. But when I got into the Air Force, I ended up working at the Air War College. So this is my first college that I'm working at. Great experience. I would do it all over again. If you're thinking about going into the Air Force, it's a great choice. Or at least it was a great choice for me. But that was working at the Air War College. After I finished my undergraduate, my bachelor's degree at Troy University, downtown Montgomery, Alabama, something was pulling on me the whole time. And it said, "Hey, you need to go back to Virginia. You need to go back to Virginia and launch your career." I had no idea. So I'm at Troy University. I finished at Troy University probably with a 2.8 GPA. Okay, much better than no 1.8 GPA in high school. So I'll call my sister. This is December the 15th, December the 16th, 2005. And she knew that I was coming home. She said, "Hey, so where are you going to stay?" And I said, "Huh?" She said, "Yeah, like, where are you going to stay?" I said, "Huh?" She just paused and she laughed. She said, "Okay." She said, "Look, I don't have much, but you can stay with me. You can sleep on the couch until you get on your feet. And if you know my sister, you better quickly get on your feet. All right. So I moved back home to Virginia. I'm working on my resume. She looks at my resume. She looks at somebody else's resume. At this time, she was working for Pepsi Cola. And she said, Moses, you've been applying for jobs, but you haven't gotten any interviews. Let me see your resume. So she's looking at my resume and she says, let me show you some resumes. This is horrible. She goes upstairs, she gets a file, she comes down and says, hey, look at this resume. Now look at your resume. Who would you interview? Who would you hire? Now look at this resume. Look at your resume. I said, Tasha, okay, I get it. She said, I'm gonna do your resume for you. That's probably your problem. So this is on a Sunday, this is on a Saturday. She does the resume. On that Sunday, the newspaper was thrown out. This is, back in the day. So the newspaper comes to the front door. I grab the newspaper. I'm looking at jobs. I'm cutting out the news, all the job clippings there. And I see one out of 16 of those jobs. I see one. It said manager and trainee, right? To work at a college. Must have 4-year degree, must be smart. Now, I'm an Air Force guy, right? So we're thinking, okay, we know a thing or two, So I take the resume that my sister created, and this was on a Saturday. So on that Sunday, I saw the job, and I had a resume. That Monday morning at 6 o'clock on the dot, my body just jumped up. I sat straight up, and something said, fax the resume. Yes, fax machine. Okay, this is December 2005. Fax the resume. I get up, I go right over to her kitchen. I send off my resume to this school. And this is on a Monday morning, 6 o'clock. 3 hours and 15 minutes later at 9:15, the campus president of that college called me for an interview. And long story short, I interviewed. The job was to become a manager and trainee. This is a 6-month program. You're going to be an admissions rep for a module for 4 or 5 weeks. You're going to know what it's like to enroll a student. You're going to work in financial aid. So you're going to leave that campus, drive over to this other campus. After you learn how to be an admissions rep, now you're going to learn at this campus how to be a financial aid officer. When you finish those 5, which ended up being 15 weeks, when you finish that, we're going to send you to the Chesapeake campus where you're going to work in career services. You're going to learn how to connect graduates with employers who are already looking to hire. You're going to do their resume. You're going to coach them, give them interviewing skills. So I did that. Then you're going to leave Chesapeake, Virginia, and you're going to go to Virginia Beach, Virginia, and you're going to sit with the registrar. You're going to learn how to create a course schedule, how to post grades, how to post attendance. And after you finish that, you're going to shadow the college president there. You're going to shadow him for a month. Just follow him around and see how he moves. Phenomenal program. Those programs don't exist anymore, but phenomenal program. I go through that entire experience. It really took me 10 months. They allowed me, to my benefit, they allowed me to stay in financial aid for 3 or 4 months to make sure I understood Title IV funding, financial aid, right? Your Pell Grants, your subsidized loans, your unsubsidized loans, your R2T4s and the likes. And so once I completed that program, the company had just purchased a school in Northern Virginia, in Fairfax County, Virginia. So I became a campus director there. And then a few months later, I had to walk that campus through initial accreditation and the likes. Then my supervisor called me and she said, hey, Moses, I would like for you to run 2 campuses, one in Northern Virginia and one in Richmond, Virginia. Just do it for about 2 or 3 months until I find someone who can, be the campus president in Northern Virginia or in Richmond. By the way, which one would you want? I said, well, the Richmond campus is a bit larger than the Northern Virginia campus. By that time, I had moved it to Alexandria, Virginia. So I'll take Richmond. So I'm doing 2 days down in Richmond, 2 days in DC. I'm going back and forth. And I did that. All right. Great experience. After that, I started leading I'm going to fast forward here. I started leading many other colleges, and I got addicted to turning around schools. right? So even if you look at my LinkedIn profile, you will see that on average, I stayed out of school for about 2.5 years. Once I got to a school, I always wanted a school that was underperforming because I went through the entire management trainee program. I learned all the details and admissions, financial aid, registration, bursar, which is like student accounts, right? Career services, shadowing a campus president. I felt like, man, I know the little nicks and all the great details. So I would love to take on a school and turn it around. But once I turned it around, I got bored and I wanted another school. So let me go take on another school, and I enjoyed it. So with all that being said, that was my entry point, but being inspired by my mother, seeing the impact that that short-term education, even long-term education, right? So whether that school is for-profit or non-for-profit or what have you, getting or furthering your training and your education, it can have a significant impact on you. And seeing the impact that it had on my mother and on the lives of myself and my brother and my sister, I got bit by the higher ed bug early. And then working in higher ed, being on active duty in the Air Force, showed me a different vantage point. And then now, having not done well in high school, right, to now leading my own college gave me a lot of purpose and a lot of drive. And I was so afraid to fail. And so that pretty much drove me, but I always appreciated the fact that I had the opportunity to prepare for a career in higher education. Those opportunities don't exist anymore, but now they do. And so now that I've led colleges for 15, 18 years now, I want to give back. And this is why I created the National Institute for Higher Education Training. It did not exist when I was going through. And I've met plenty of people who wanted to become a director of admissions, an admissions rep, a registrar, a financial aid officer, a career services representative, a director of career services, an instructor, a program chair, an academic dean, and even individuals who wanted to become a campus president. And so all of that came together and encouraged me to establish the National Institute for Higher Education Training. And now you have an opportunity to take the same training that I received and the lessons that I've learned in the past 15 to 20 years, and I've put it in a course so that now you can take that and you can prepare to launch or advance your own career in higher education. And that's my story. I hope this was helpful.